questions. So we're going to start with the offense. And Jeremy, I don't want to buy into the Kool-Aid too much, but I mean, it's hard not to look at this and that they're clearly ahead of last year, just on where everyone was feeling things out in training camp. And I guess my question to you is, well, actually, you know what? I'll let you get to your observations. I do want to try to dissect the reason for it, but just
Sure.
where are they ahead right now, in your opinion?
Well, I mean, saying they're ahead of last year is it's a low bar to
It's
set,
not a high.
right?
It's not a high bar to clear. That's for
The
sure.
thing about last year was it became evident the first week that there were going to be issues on offense. Jared Goff did not look comfortable. There wasn't a receiver out there that looked like they could handle starting duties. Just everything did not look like they were meshing together. And now they look like an offense with a game plan. Like there's clearly a scheme in place. Jared Goff looks comfortable. He's more decisive. There are some questions I still have there that we'll get to in a little bit, but in general, like you can just see the general overall plan. You can see the receivers that have the talent that they do. There's just a cohesiveness that's there that, I mean, you'd expect in year two, but there's also, like, at the same time, the part where I want to pull back a little bit here is this is also kind of a year one for the offense with the new offensive coordinator in place, and you see glimpses of that too. You see glimpses of, like, wait a second, they're not there yet. This isn't going to be a top 10 offense out of the gate. And what I mean by that is, I would say in the past two practices alone, there's probably been 6 or 7 times in which the offense breaks the huddle, gets to the line, Dan Campbell blows a whistle. We don't know exactly what went wrong there, but it was like, you guys got to rehuddle. They either didn't break quick enough, which is something they're trying to emphasize, breaking the huddle quicker. They either didn't get lined up correctly, or there was some sort of miscommunication. And of course, that stuff is normal this early in camp. Even more normal when you're in year one of a new scheme. But I think it's also kind of a sign that says, like, okay, we all have to remember here, new verbiage for everybody, new schemes, new philosophy with this offense. Like, there's a lot of changes on that side of the ball that's going to make it so it's not going to be such pristine. It might not even be as good as it was at the end of last year to start the gate, at least.
Ryan, do you mind if I ask you a question, or do you have thoughts on what Jeremy said?
No, go ahead.
So from everything Jeremy was talking about, and I guess this kind of goes in the conversation I want to have is, I think a lot of that can go to Anthony Lynn, but like how much, if we had to weigh how much of that is on the new offensive scheme, making things look farther ahead, how much of that is on Jared Goff looking more comfortable right now, and how much of that is on better offensive weapons for the passing game, how much are you weighing each of those three considerations looking at this team right now?
Yeah, I think if you're taking the pie approach, I think the biggest slice is that Jared Goff actually has offensive skill position players that are worth a damn. I mean, going into last season training camp, it was Tyrell Williams and Brashad Perryman as 1 and 2, and Brashad Perryman didn't make the football team. So when your projected number 2 wide receiver doesn't even make it out of camp, doesn't even make the 53-man roster, I mean, that's a pretty big deal. I think we saw enough Jared Goff in the first half of last season when he was having to throw to the likes of a Trinity Benson, who was clearly out of his element. He was just as lost in the offense as Jared Goff was. Khalif Raymond was a starter. I mean, a lot of guys who were being called on to shoulder a big load and to handle some things with the offense early on weren't ready. And that included Jared Goff. So I'm hoping that it's less building the plane in the air this season. Because it was quite clear that, when Dan Campbell made the change midway through the season, that the plane just couldn't get off the ground. Like they didn't even have wings on the thing. So like, it's nice that at least in training camp, that if the Lions are going through some growing pains, they go through them in training camp. They don't go through them week 8 against the Philadelphia Eagles.
And that it's interesting too, because the other part about that, and it's something they've really been pushing since spring, is the gotta have it situations, right? The end of half situations. That's something that Dan Campbell has said, like, we waited way too long last year, and we got into those situations in season, and we weren't prepared for them. You know, we had the double timeout. We had the ending of that Ravens game that was a defensive breakdown. We had all those things. We're working on those things now so that we don't have to worry about them. Like you said, build the plane inside the season. You get that stuff done now. And since you have kind of a baseline everywhere else, now you can hammer home some of that like specialized situation stuff so that you aren't caught off guard when it happens in the season, because it's going to happen.
Yeah. So they're working on dagger time is what you're telling me.
That's right.
Oh,
yes,
God.
More dagger time.
Well, the one thing that is also being worked on, I want to get to tight ends, I want to get to running backs, but I want to jump the line a little bit to wide receivers, because to Ryan's point about having better weapons, one of the ones I don't think we've talked about too much was Josh Reynolds.
Yep.
And there's two comments from Dan Campbell. First off, Dan Campbell's thing this season right now has been nicknames.
Yep.
He is all in on making nicknames, and he gave out, usually I want to get this quote here. I call him the praying mantis. He's a spider of death. He's just, there's something about him, freaking serpent. So 3 different animals right off the bat. A mantis is not a spider. So he's a spider, mantis, serpent. That looks horrifying. I'm sure that's going to be in the next season of Stranger Things at some point. A lot of cool nicknames, but also that he says that he wants to buy stock. I kind of buying stock in him. I think he could have a big year. Jeremy, what have you seen of Josh Reynolds so far that makes you think for Dan Campbell is justified in saying these things about Josh Reynolds?
Well, I think he's kind of almost looked like the number one right now. And I'm not trying to take anything away from DJ Chark, because he's looked good. I think there might be some concern right now that he needs a little ramp up period because of his ankle. Like that's not something that I think he's 100% in the clear of yet. He's close, and I don't think there's any concern that he'll miss time or anything like that. But I think he's just maybe not at his most explosive, whereas Josh Reynolds is a guy who's out there making plays. Now, the other kind of big picture thing here that I want to point out here is we haven't seen a lot of like downfield plays like maybe you were hoping or expecting, since they invested in these outside receivers yet. But that's by design. Like last year, it was because Jared Goff was standing in the pocket for 5 seconds, couldn't find anyone when checked down. This is more designed short stuff. And so they're utilizing the speed of the receiving core, their speed of their tight ends, the speed of their running backs to do a lot of stuff in the backfield, whether it's, reverses, screens, motion, all that sort of stuff. So I think they're designed to kind of play a little bit closer to the line of scrimmage right now. That could change when the pads come on. That could change when everyone's feeling more healthy. We'll see. Whether Josh Reynolds is going to have a breakout year or buy stock and all that stuff, I think a lot of that depends too on Jameson, right? Like I think at this point we all pretty much expect him to start on the NFI list, which means he's going to miss the first 4 weeks. So that's his time to shine. But the question is, like, when Jameson comes back, how much do you scale back Josh Reynolds' role? Because he's a weapon. He's a good guy. Like, he is a solid number 2 receiver. He's an even better number 4 if you're taking him off the bench. And I don't think they completely remove his role once Jameson comes back. So in that sense, yeah, I'm buying a little Josh Reynolds stock. Do I expect him to be an 800, 900 yard season kind of stock? Probably not, but I don't know. I guess it depends. He's got the athleticism. I think the whole serpent spider death is all about his mantis. Quickness, his slipperiness, and that sort of stuff is definitely noticeable out there.
Are you buying stock, Ryan? Are you Jim Cramer?
I don't know if I can buy stock on Josh Reynolds just because of the reasons that Jeremy mentioned in terms of, and I guess this goes to the overall optimism that is surrounding the wide receiver room. And I think it's one of our questions that we got on Spotify Live one time, Jeremy, but it was like, could the Lions have 3 1,000-yard receivers? It's like,
that's crazy. That's
back.
Hold on a second.
I'm saying pull that back, but I'm saying like, I would be surprised maybe if the Lions had 1,000-yard receiver.
They're just spreading it out so much. Yeah.
I think that there's just so many options. And, you talk about Jamison Price starting on the NFI, how long he's going to be there. And, when he makes his debut, is Reynolds going to take a back seat, or will he have earned a spot where he needs to be out there more consistently and they need to find ways to get him out there? I know you said there isn't much concern around DJ Chark and the ankle, and it's really just like a ramp up period to get him to the point where he's like, comfortable near as 100% as you can be as a football player. But it's one of those things where it's like, I don't want you missing out at all.
Right.
Like, I don't want you to be missing anything. Like, this is really important time because, again, like we said with Goff and the offense and everything, like the onboarding process is now. Like you should be getting, and that's why I guess my expectations for Jameson are kind of peeled back too. It's like rookie, wide receiver, first year, and you're starting the year on NFI. Like my expectations for Jameson are pretty low. Like I don't know if they can get much lower.
For
Yeah,
as much, for as much hype as there is about this wide receiving core, I think we've mentioned it a couple times this offseason. There are still a lot of questions with every single one of them. Maybe the most clean prospect is Amon-Ra.
Yeah, I was gonna say Amon-Ra. Like I'm the one who I can depend on him the most. But at the end of the day, like he's prototypical for the slot.
Right.
Like you. And there's questions about how much use he's going to get when he's not the main mouth to feed at a certain point too. If they try to spread the ball around a little bit more, but at the same time, he's also seems to be
if there's
Goff's security blanket.
If there's one thing I can point out about Amon-Ra without getting too specific, so I get in trouble with the Lions, it's that even on plays that Amon-Ra isn't the main target, they are utilizing him in ways that the term I like, and we used it a lot when we were talking about the 49ers last year, eye candy. He is the guy that they are going to they're running plays that look like they're for Amon-Ra, but they aren't for Amon-Ra. And so they're used for getting other people open. And so I think they can almost use all of the attention he got at the end of last season against defenses in ways that's just like, oh yeah, we're going to feed Amon-Ra. Yeah, yep, you better guard him. Oops. Josh Reynolds is wide open over the middle.
That kind of feels like how the Raiders might be treating with like Hunter Renfrow this year. Yeah. Because Hunter Renfrow was just unstoppable in the red zone. I know some of my friends say, oh, that's only because was like the only guy they could feed for the Raiders. But like when Renfrow runs that route in the red zone, that's a problem. When Amon-Ra gets open, it's a problem.
One more thing about Amon-Ra, because he's just so fun to watch in camp, because he's giving
so
it 100 billion%. He's also a blocking weapon. He took out Aiden Hutchinson on a play. Like,
wait, really?
Yeah, he did. Like, this dude is a competitor, and so like, and that's something that I think he talked about working on this offseason. Amon-Ra, a guy who we were already comparing to Hines Ward because of the way he was blocking, said he needed to get better at blocking. So like, defensive ends that aren't paying attention, you better look out for that wham block from Amon-Ra, because he's ready for it.
I love it. Let's take it to running backs right now. I want to save some time for tight end. I know we're going a bit long here, but guys, it's hard to judge the running backs right now. Again, pads haven't come on. Running back, I think a lot of what we're going to learn about them is how well they're going to take some of the hits and shrug them off. You had a note here, though, Jeremy, about DeAndre Swift, who's kind of like, look, the run game depends on DeAndre Swift.
Yeah.
No ifs, ands, or buts about it. They want to put more on his plate during training camp to get him prepared for a fuller workload in the regular season, but they still don't want to put on too much. So like, I'm assuming that makes sense to me. I think if you want to have the balanced offense, you want to have a run heavy offense, even marginally, you're going to need Swift to take a larger workload this year.
Yeah. And I think that's the plan. I think Dan Campbell, he called him one of the most explosive players that they have. Like they want to, cater a huge chunk of this offense to him. And you think about what happened last year. He was a guy who was pretty limited during training camp. It seemed like every other day he was scaled back almost completely, not doing anything. And so this year they're like, okay, we can't have that this year. He needs to be like prepared. His body needs to be prepared for a daily grind. And we still might scale things back every now and then, because as a guy with an injury history, we don't want to do anything that's going to cause harm to start the season. But you need to kind of get in that physical mindset right away. And we know that he got stronger in the offseason. We know he looks a little bit thicker in some ways, even though he actually weighs a little bit less. But like almost like Amon-Ra, like there are times when you can see that this offense is catered specifically to DeAndre Swift's strengths, which is both as a rusher and receiver, particularly on the edges. And when you got a guy like Penei, man, on the edge, who's a like a mauler in the run game, you look out. And I thought Swift was particularly lethal over the first 4 days in the red zone. I know that picture of him catching the wheel route went I don't know, viral. It went on the internet. The highlight went on the internet, and that's just one of many examples, I think, of just like how unguardable this guy can be when you get him in the right matchup. And that, again, like that's something the Lions talk about, like getting these guys in the matchup, getting DeAndre Swift on a linebacker. They're going to try to do stuff like that, and he's going to make them pay as long as they can keep him healthy.
I think to that point too, Jeremy, the comments that Campbell made seemed like they married, or they went well with what Deuce had said earlier in the offseason, right? Like talking about, the difference between playing hurt and playing injured. And I think that you go back to last season with DeAndre Swift, and it's funny, I double checked, but it was a groin injury, right?
Yep.
The groin injury limits him in training camp. And there's headlines that say, like, groin injury, like, no concern. And then you scroll a little bit further on Google and it's October and it's like groin injury hampering DeAndre Swift. It's like,
right.
Okay, like those types of things, like, they linger. Sure. And if you have a guy who's healthy right now, I mean, just go at it. Get this guy ready, because
build up the callus.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, no, that's what all the pros tell me, is like all the veterans tell me. It's like, it's all about training camp calluses. You need those hits.
Yeah, and we know the shelf life of a running back. It can be one game. You know what I mean? Like, you have to have the guy ready from Jump Street. So I think that's really important. But I don't know, what do we make of the rest of the guys in the running back room, though? Because I think even though it doesn't seem like a very interesting battle on the surface, they're going to call upon these guys at some point during the season. Like,
I was fascinated by this because I'm going through the bubble, our bubble watch we publish every week too, for the roster bubble on who's in, who's out. And I've been racking my brain between Craig Reynolds and Godwin Igwebuike and Jermar Jefferson. And like, there's a lot of guys in there that have to make this. And I think, I don't know, from what I've seen so far, I haven't seen enough from Jermar to really make me put him inside the bubble for this roster right now. I think Craig Reynolds seems like the guy who's probably got that inside track, if anything, right now. But I don't know. I want to pass. Sorry, go on, Ryan.
Real quick. I want to say at this point, like, it's hard to say who's on and who's off the bubble when it comes to running back, right? And
yeah. So nothing for Jefferson, which is a bad sign. I think our chat live just did not hear any of that, but we will have that up for the podcast. I apologize.
Sorry, I hit a mute button because Zazu was going crazy, and it muted only half of the stream, apparently.
More of a reason to download and listen. But the one thing I want to say, the one thing I want to add real quick is that, Jeremy, you said that there's really two things you can go off of, in terms of their rotation and what they're doing on special teams. I mean, the third thing is, like, what did you do last year, right? And I think of any of those guys, like Craig Reynolds was the guy who, like, stepped in, made some big plays, had a couple of big runs. He's, upgraded nicknames, right, from Netflix to Hulu. But I think what the Lions really need, though, I think they need a dependable runner. And I know it sounds weird to be like, well, your running back 3 needs to be pretty versatile, needs to be able to do special teams and this, that, and the other thing. I just don't know how much you can rely on DeAndre Swift. And I really hope what they do with that RB3 spot is they get a guy who they can depend on to give carries. And, if they want to keep a fourth running back, I know it kind of counts as Kabinda as well, if you want to throw him in the, running back, whatever he is, super back. But yeah, I keep a fourth running back if you want a special teams guy.
Let's make this real quick on tight ends. We got to, slam to a break at some point here, but on tight end, there's not a lot of clarity right now on tight end 2. And speaking of groin, I did see that Devin Funchess has been kind of missing a little bit with groin injury concerns right now. I know it's light for him, but it's still, like, for a battle for tight end 3 for a very loaded room right now for a spot that they might not even have. That's kind of worrying, but they are also taking James Mitchell a little bit slow, Jeremy.
Yeah, we really haven't seen them kind of really give him much team drills at all, and so it's kind of hard to really assess where he's at in terms of both the ACL injury and in terms of just taking on an NFL load and an NFL style of play. So I'm not gonna like necessarily slide him onto the bubble yet, but like he doesn't have a lot of time here. He's got to get going to be worthy of probably the TE3 spot. At this point, it still looks like Brock Wright is the leader of the pack. And then Garrett Griffin is I guess, the guy to look out for, because with the aforementioned Jason Kabinda, who's still on the PUP list, with him gone, it's been Griffin kind of getting that super back duties where he's playing tight end, he's playing fullback, he's playing H-back, he's doing all those sort of stuff. So, if he can, he's not going to beat out Jason Kabinda, because they paid Kabinda, they re-signed him. But if you can show that you're versatile like that, so that if Kabinda gets injured in season, well, then there's suddenly a role for you on the team. So he's a guy to just kind of keep an eye out for.
Can they put Griffin on the roster as a fullback?
I mean, they need a roster spot for it. You have to pull, maybe if you only keep, is keeping a third quarterback worth it? Is keeping a fourth running back worth it? I mean, you have to find a spot for it.
Yeah. No, I was just curious if they can make that like positional transition. That's all.
We'll see. And that's what they're trying right now.
Yeah, and I think the one thing when it comes to pads and putting them on this week is TJ Hawkinson. I want to see how physical that dude is ready to be.
Absolutely.
Season, because I think that's the one thing he needs to prove as a tight end, really. And Campbell's talked about it, and he said that Hawkinson would be the first one to admit that he needs to be better in that phase of his game. So that's what I'm looking for this week.